Good evening, folks, and welcome to FMA Discussion. This is episode 515, and today we'll be covering Dog Brothers Motorsports Camp. I believe is a few weeks away, but we'll find that out from them. So, if you're watching this and you have questions, please put them in the column in the comment section. If they don't pertain to the subject matter at the time, I will jot them down, but just not to interrupt the flow of the question. As always, watch this last minute like button. And if you have not check out the draws. I highly recommend do. Some at the end, they think they're going to go there and you're going to get beat up and you're going to get hurt. I posted a couple beat the crap out of cancers. Yeah, I got bruised, but I saw new people going in there. They were very nice to them. They gave them experience. They didn't beat on them. It's actually frowned upon from where I stand. And if you have a group there, like in my case, I had a boss group leader and a group leader, and they weren't allowed that nonsense. So it's not and probably the most ego-free guys I've ever collectively been in a room with. Just fantastic people. That's not allowed to get a bunch more trucks in the room. And so if you're coming in with an attitude and everything, we're gonna have some. For you, we have Marc and Knaus. Here we go. Why is this not lifting them up? These are all right. Hold on, everyone. Hang with me. Here we go. See that? Sometimes you just got a stupid glitch or something unknown to mankind. But
yeah,
guys, welcome.
Excuse me 1 second. I got to put the dog back in his spot. Hold on.
All right,
keep going.
So no problem. So hi Eric, how are you doing?
I'm good, and yourself?
Yeah, good. So what's new in Texas?
Summer's coming in, getting hot and humid in Houston. Just had visit from my daughter and her husband, and I'm getting ready for a IBJJF event in August, and then the Worlds at the end of August, and doing my usual seminar stuff, or stick seminars we have here in Houston, where I train for the jujitsu. So life continues. Sounds like a dog in the background.
Yeah, that was Lobo.
So you're being beat. Wow, that's impressive. That's one.
Yeah.
And seminars. How you doing, PJ Marc?
Here, you know what? I'm going to need to put the dog in the other room. I was hoping he would stay in his place on the cot. He and the cat have territorial wars. The cat tries picking a fight with him. So here, give me a moment. Here, you know what? Let me see if I can. Can you see him off there in the back? No, let's see. That's not working. All right, just give me a moment to put him away. He's being very Akita.
Sure. You're still wow. So, age bracket. What is bracket?
Go ahead.
You're just competing.
What
are the age bracket?
It's Master 7. It's the very end. After that, they are 62 and up. I think that's the end of the road for Masters. And I'm actually 67, so I'm about 5 years old, or probably 5 years older than the guy I'm competing against.
Wow, that's awesome. Wow, that's impressive.
Okay, right, so I am back.
Situated.
Yeah, I put the dog away.
So
that way.
All right, situated.
Yeah, all 115 pounds of them. So hello, everyone.
Is this the first time you guys been doing a camp together for some time now?
Well, this is a DBMA summer camp, and so I think we're coming up maybe on year 10 of them. And so DBMA has three areas: the real contact stick fighting, what I call Kali Tudo, and what I call die less often. And so the themes vary from year to year. Let's see, when was the last time you were at the camp, Eric? About
Die less
5, 6 years ago.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, so this year the theme is stick. Other years the theme, Dean, Lloyd well. He was a guest instructor at one of the years. I had Anton, who's now defensive tactics instructor for San Fran PD and tactical games national champion. So, of course, old dog brother as well, Splinter Dog. And so he and I just did 3 days with the San Fran PD and anti-knife. So the theme varies from camp to camp. And I just, it's been a while since we reminded people about the stick. And so who better for that than the legend themselves? So normally we've been holding it in Guard Dog Ryan Groom School in State College, PA. But Eric's son was getting married the only weekend that Ryan could do it. And when the dust cleared, we're doing it in LA at Faithful Dog Nathan Carlin School in Chatsworth, Los Angeles. And so that is what's happening.
Wow. And so,
silent.
And is this 2-day event?
A 3-day event.
3-day.
Yeah. So July 11 through 13, go to dogbrothers.com for all the merriment about where to sign up. And, the schedule is there as to what both Eric and I will be teaching in the different sessions, and I'm excited about the material that I've developed since the last time that Eric and I were together. So for me, it's like, oh boy, I get to show this to Eric and see what he thinks.
Nice.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of, for me, I've gravitated more to double stick than to anything else. Certainly staff, and but I feel for me the double stick has been my strongest area, and I've been developing some things. And so,
All right. So Eric, what will you be teaching?
I'll be doing mostly single stick. I do like double stick, but I feel like my strong suit has been single stick and closing, some footwork that pertains to that. And then once you close, a couple of options that you have. Mostly, close quarter stuff, but a lot of times it's kind of an ad hoc sort of a thing. Someone will ask a question and then you'll kind of go off on a tangent. At least I will. And then next thing you know, you're in a completely different train of thought. But it'll start with closing. We'll put it that way.
Okay, so closing the. Okay. And I don't know if Mark heard me now, but it's a 2-day event. Am I correct?
3-day event.
3, 2.
3-day.
So 3.
I'm not sure, but you're back. So
okay, yeah, I don't know what happened there. I had to re-enter. So I think one of the areas that a lot of the systems are missing is the art and science of closing. And so, Eric is very strong with that. And, I attribute part of that to his background in college level football. He was a defensive end for Columbia University, which requires a certain temperament. And
that's an understatement.
And he also plays lacrosse, which I feel those people familiar with lacrosse, the movements of the stick with the basket at the end are very deceptive. Eric maybe he'll tell some stories about how when he was in Europe, he sort of put the hat on the pavement in front of him and he did some, what did you call it? Your dancing dog routine or whatever, dancing bear routine.
Yeah, it was basically.
And, so
go ahead, Mark.
So just, so I'm sorry, there's a bit of a time lag here. I didn't mean, And so that gives some distinctive qualities to, what he brought to stick fighting. When he first came in, when we first saw him, we had never seen anybody who was just running and crashing the way that he was, and that's something that I studied and observed. And so, what I picked up from watching him was that, unlike anybody else that I had seen or any of the training that I had done, is that there was a real art and science to how he moved the stick when he wasn't hitting or blocking, and it's what we came to call the snaky stick.
Sneaky stick.
And so, so he has his distinctive patterns, starting with the clock and all the strikes that come out of it. We saw that in the first series and so forth. But using that concept as a starting point, I've developed a block of material that I call abecedarios, which is Spanish word for alphabet, and that word is centered several of the Filipino dialects. And so, he has the clock, he has the double clock, but then we have where it's going in the other direction, time machine. And so there's different patterns, and this will be what I'll be working on Friday night. And what this is snake range is pre-contact range. When I was talking to Grandmaster Ramiro Escalilla, talking to him about my concept of pre-contact as a range, he knew right away what I was talking about. He says, oh, yes, the psychological range. And so, that is really where you establish the moment of contact. So it's a really important range. But when I first was articulating that, people went, huh? How could it be a range if nobody's hitting? And, so that we have, the pre-contact range, which we call snake range, because Eric's stick was like a snake getting ready to strike. Then we have weapon range, where the weapons hit each other, and a staff fight important, and a knife duel not so important. In between the two, the stick, sometimes important, sometimes not. Then largo, medio, corto, then clinch, then ground. So DBMA has 7 ranges. And something that Eric articulated in the first series, the triangle from the third dimension, and there's a point there where he's showing hitting the stick, hitting the hand, hitting the head, and moving around those 3 points. And so as I was observing that there, he was stationary because he was staying on camera in that moment, but really that is where we have to have what I call the one-for-one relationship, that every single, there's a modality of movement, an idiom of movement, where every movement of the stick also gets a full step. And when people first are exposed to that, they come to realize they're not as coordinated as they thought they were, because they're used to blazing the stick around and not moving their feet as much as they're blazing the stick around. And there's a cognitive dissonance there. Eric was just fully integrated due to his football background. Yes, I run at him, I smash him. Lacrosse. I'm moving around with a stick, I fake him out, I come this way. And combined with his training in Pikiti Tertia. And so we have, so what I will be showing is, first I will be showing over the course of the weekend is the abecedarios. People will get what they can. For a lot of people, there's a kind of rub your head, pat your tummy quality to it at first. And, but once you get the feel of it, it's like, oh, I get it. And so then from there, how to go into, one of the 3 basic modalities for closing the distance. We have attack by combination, we have attacking blocks, and then we have occupying strikes. So an attacking block, I enjoy playing with words, and so it's a block. That's a defensive word. How can you attack with a block? And the answer is when you can read where the guy's stick is. He's got his caveman here. I dare you. I've got my baseball bat swing here. I dare you. When you can read where the stick is, when people are fighting, they will do this. This is, we believe in primal probabilities first. Is the attacking block is when you step into the measure between the two of you, he will swing or he will move back. And so you get to control, you get to say to him, I want you to swing now. And I know that you're going to be swinging on this line. I know that you're going to be swinging on this line. So we need to have blocks that we believe in. So Eric has, shown the way, from the beginning with, this is a roof block, and like how many roof blocks have we seen over the years where people came in and, their roof block really lacked understanding.
Mm-hmm. Belief.
And so I will be doing this in the context of double stick and then the combinations that come out of that. So anyway, so that's sort of my sense of where the weekend is going. And Eric certainly knows his pieces of that equation really well. Over to you, Eric.
Oh, wow. Hard to follow that up.
That's interesting.
Um, go ahead. So the
What's really interesting is played Boston College,
okay, go ahead, Dean.
SDC, around, you know.
I'm sorry,
Somewhere
Dean, you
on
cut out.
I
Say
know.
YouTube,
again.
I'm just thinking that's neat how you made that parallel.
somewhere on YouTube, there is a clip of me. My son was doing lacrosse for a couple of years when he was in grade school, and so I know they have the 6 foot stick. You know, Eric will recognize this for the D stick. And so what I started playing with was instead of holding it at the end, trying to take advantage of the reach, I started holding it in the middle, what I call the thirds grip. So when a guy tried to do a dodge roll, Eric will know what I'm talking about here. I could go either way and stop the movement. So there's a clip of me working with the lacrosse defensive coach, sharing the idea. That's somewhere on YouTube. Anyway, so, lacrosse is an awesome, awesome game. I so wish that I'd been exposed to it when I was a boy. I would have been playing. I envy Eric that experience.
It's fun. Sorry, Dean, go ahead. You got a question?
No, I'm just saying, like, what was the light bulb that went off, taking your defensive end and your lacrosse and kind of combining it into your style, I guess.
Um, Probably where a lot of everything just clicked was I think Mark kind of touched on it when I there was a time when I graduated from we did some fighting in when I was at Columbia, but the real I guess the fluidity came when I went to Europe actually after graduation, and I would just put on basically I would do a workout and a workout with double sticks, single sticks, double sticks, and then Spani Daga. And I had a little cigar box that I put out in 3 different languages. Help me buy my next meal, basically English, French, and German. And I don't think I had Spanish on that at that time because I was in Switzerland, I was in Germany, and France, and I just did a
You
workout.
speak you speak German in one of the Norse languages, Eric?
Well, German, I understand Norwegian because it's very similar to German, believe it or not. I can read it actually better than I can talk it, but because again, there's a lot of similarity. But German is not a problem, and so I just put the languages out there, and people would watch. And they all said, "Oh, do you know?" Remember, this is like late '70s, early '80s. People saying, "Oh, do you know Bruce Lee?" I said, "Oh yeah, we're like this." Of course, he'd been dead for 10 years, but the so I would just do a workout, and then I would have people. And at the time, remember, this is like turn of the decade, and at the time, there were most towns, small towns, would have like a little culture center, and I would be there. People would be playing chess. People would be playing a guitar. They'd have like a little amplifier, and I would just basically set up shop. Pull up my sticks, pull up my cigar box, and people would come by and they'd throw me, a couple of marks or francs or whatever kind of, currency they had. And a lot of times at the end, um, that was kind of my hook to get people in, and then we'd start talking about it. And then at that point, that's where I started reading hands, which Mark knows quite a bit about as well. And so I actually, I mean, I read. I'm pretty good at reading hand analysis, and so I would read people's hands. And I did that actually when I fought too. I'd read their hands before I'd fight. But I did. I'd read hands there, and then they'd invite me in their homes, read their hands for their family, and then I would do stick training there as well.
Yeah,
So kind of.
When I first met Eric, I had a particular girlfriend, and he's reading my hand, and he had read her hand, and he had read her hand. He's reading my hand, and then out of the clear blue, he says, "She must drive you crazy, interrupting you when you're reading." and I'm like, oh my god, not a like not a mentalist, extraction or whatnot. Like so it was a different kind of hand reading. It was a mixture of. The simple example is different hands interact with the world differently. And
Differently.
for my classic example of this is I was in a roadside cafe in Arizona on my way to Sedona, and the guy sitting next to me, each one of his fingers was the size of two of mine, and just these big paws of a hand. Of hands, and so we happened to leave at the same time, and I saw him get in his pickup truck, and there on the on the panel on the door of the truck it said tree stump removal, and of course that is a hand that goes into tree stump removal, and so if you apply that principle, so that was the starting point. This was not gypsy fortune telling, but something different, and it also the vocabulary was of for me, Greek mythology, the terminology was Roman, the Roman names for it. I always preferred the Greek over the Roman. But, and a lot of that really resonates with Jungian psychology, which was an interest of mine. And I was single at the time. So for me, this was the perfect way to pick up girls. And,
Yep.
I would hold I'd hold their hands and talk about their favorite subject. Who are you? And, so that was my particular interest to it. Although when my sister was involved with the broadcast side of professional boxing, she would get me these gigs as assistant stage manager, which meant I was at Al Bernstein's elbow during the telecast in charge of the security around him. So I got to meet all kinds of, top world champions and read their hands as well. Most remarkable hand of all was Tommy Hearns, liquid rock. And he's an ectomorph, but those fingers were strong. And in moments like that, it was during the dress rehearsal the night before the Buster Douglas Evander Holyfield Championship, and you only have a moment to grab their attention. So I looked at his hand. I said, "Well, you're going to live to 100 and fuck till you're 90." And so with that, I had him hooked. It was tell me more. But what's that?
Wait. There's some
you say something, Bean?
Stuff going on, I think, with him. Oh, he's back.
Are we having?
No, you're back. You were kind of going in and out. I'm on my end at least.
Anyway, I was just talking. So
you went out for a bit.
Eric and he was turning me on to this. It wasn't just the stick fighting. It turns we were both alumni of Columbia.
Yeah.
He was in the undergrad, and I did law school there. So there were a number of areas of interest, not just the martial arts. And on rainy days, we would read Conan the Barbarian comic books together. I have a vast collection of Conan the Barbarian, and so many faceted interaction. Come on, Dean, help us out here. Give us some questions.
I guess so. No, I am. I'm just waiting. I just don't want to interrupt you guys. No, so I do have questions. So double stick for you, single stick for Eric. Any other weapons that you guys will be covering, or combinations or configurations?
Well, Eric is, I've seen his lesson plan, and like he mentioned, he may go off on tangents. Of course, I'm notorious for going off on tangents, but the plan, which is always subject to interaction with life, but the plan is single stick and double stick. I've been working bayonet a lot. I have a, what a Mossberg shockwave is? It's a short shotgun. It doesn't really have the usual stock. So when you're shooting it, you need good strength. It's not for weak people. And there's no stock resting against the shoulder. It's a very much a close quarter weapon. And so I've put a bayonet on it, and so I'm taking some of my staff movement and combining the two. So I'm thinking it's very much going to be my home protection, like inside the house, coming around a corner, if there's a bayonet on the tip of the gun, nobody's grabbing it.
That's
And so,
neat.
I got the, just like I showed in the staff DVD, there's the wrapping jab and the thrust, the thrusts and so forth. And, so anyway, that's, an area of current amusement for me. I was in a gun store out near Fort Bragg, and this guy says to me, "Hey, are you Marc Denny, Crafty Dog?" And I said, "Well, yes, I am." He says, "I have your DLO DVDs." This is one of the salesmen there. And it turns out he was a Marine and had been a contractor, and he had a bail bonds bounty operation that he's running and this and that. And he says, "You looking for anything?" I said, "Well, I'm looking for a bullpup." I don't know if everybody knows what that is, but it's where the beginning of the barrel is well behind the trigger, making for net overall shorter length, so the weight is closer to you. And I'm missing a ligament in my left shoulder, so the regular AR type of a rifle, I'm kind of wavering around out here because of the missing ligament. So the weight much closer to me was very appealing. He says, "Are you looking at a particular one?" I said, "Well, I'm thinking of the Israeli Tavor. I've been doing research, online and so forth." He says, "Oh, well, we happen to have two, and one is used, and I can let you shoot it on the range and back." Being next to Fort Bragg, a gun store has a really good gun range. And it's a very different manual of arms from the AR type configuration. And I'm watching him, introduce me to it, and I could tell he knows this really, really well. And, this variation of the sling, da, 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 da. Well, it turns out he had been alongside the Israelis in Syria. And so that's where.
Whoop. I think we lost him.
I'm not sure. He's he's got some
All of a
internet,
sudden he was
he's got some
gone.
internet stuff going on. I'm not sure what it is. But as far as you so I know you're doing single stick. You're coming in, crashing. You're gonna get into the clinch. Will you be showing some ground stuff as well?
Yeah, if it lends itself to that. I mean, because as we were just talking about, I do a lot of jujitsu, and it's funny because my instructor Leo Gahi, when he knew I was doing jujitsu, he was a little. He kind of paused for a minute when I told him that, and he goes, Edek, he had a very thick Filipino accent. Edek, when you're fighting with many people, you never go to the ground. And I go, I know, Tuhan, yeah. He goes, so just remember that. Like, got it. Because from their point of view, a fight's never one on one. It's one on or multiple on multiple, and going to the ground is kind of like bad strategy because you get stepped on or your head is a soccer ball for somebody. And so if it lends itself, it's there. Someone might bring it up. I had this in Spain and Italy a couple of times where people had asked certain positions. And most of the time when you go to the ground, I try to, if it's not over in say 5 seconds, I'd say, all right, time to get up again. We could continue, but it's not a jujitsu match. It's a stick fighting match or stick fighting uh, competition, so to speak, drill. That I'd rather keep it that way because you don't, if it is that, if you do go to the ground, usually someone's about to jump on your back anyway. If it's a multiple situation, so some maybe, but probably I won't spend much time on it.
Yeah, indication of the Filipino mindset when I was at Tuangake's home in Bacolod. I've been bringing the jujitsu into the dog brother fighting, and so they were curious about it, and at the same time very proud of Filipino Kali. And said, "What is this guard position we hear of?" And so, he said this and that. And I established guard, and I said, "What would you do now?" And the first thing was, "Well, I'd spit in your face."
Okay.
As a disruption. I had not thought of that, but that's indicative of a different mind.
Distraction.
Anyway,
Yeah.
So it's a different thought process. And, so with the Dog Brother gatherings in America, something that I did because we had a lot of people who were sort of swatting sticks once or twice and then running in and doing blue belt jujitsu MMA kind of a fight. And so that's where I said, okay, we're now going to allow hidden knives, hidden weapons, and so forth, so that people started paying attention, not just, taking a whack on the way in. And been rolling around and saying, "Oh, I did a dog brother gathering." Oh, okay, but yeah. So the jujitsu, that's been something I tended to focus on. So, for example, when I was fighting Arlen, Eric knows the story of he was there the first time that I brought out the jujitsu. It was only after 9 lessons. This would be, I think, August or September of 1990, well before the UFC. And Arlen had always bullied me around the field. I'm a light heavyweight. He's a true heavyweight, an unusually powerful one with unusually high pain tolerance, with unusual power. And I would try to go for the hand hits, and he would run in and grab me by the head and throw me down. And so I was training with Carlos Machado, and he says, "Oh, think of it this way: when he grabs you by the head, he's giving you his back." And Punagura
I
Edgar,
remember
he
that.
and Punagura Edgar prepared me with something. See, Arlen's got a very good way. If you're kind of floating around here in front of you, he winds up like this, and if you don't protect your head, he will crack your head. But when you go up with the roof block, he will drift underneath with a shot at whack at the knee, a particular combination that follows it comes from the DeRobio system. He's hit me with it various times over the years. And so I showed, Punagura Edgar, my problem with this guy. I said, "What do I do with this guy?" He says, "Oh, for him, it is easy. You keep your hand higher than his." And so if you watch that footage from tape 5, you'll see, okay, hand higher. And I'm just kind of waving my stick around like this. And so Arlen intuited that all I needed to do was just drop. Whereas before, if I were here, he was presenting me with the choice of, do I go up or do I go down? So Punagura Edgar's advice was very fight practical and to the point. And so that's when he just ran in and grabbed me by the head, and I applied Carlos's thought, okay, when somebody grabs you by the head and you're behind, here's how you squirt out. And that was the beginning of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Dog Brothers fighting. And so that was a particular area of interest for me. I went as far as brown belt under Higgin. But the Machados are more sport oriented, and at that point I was Higgin had introduced me to Rico Chiapparelli, who had invited me over to the Raw Gym in El Segundo. For those who don't know, Rico, wrestling god, 2-time world champion under Dan Gable, and had an MMA gym. It was Frank Trigg, who went for the title, Vladimir Matushenko, who went for the title, a young Lyoto Machida, Waleed Ishmael, world-class MMA gym. And so that's where I began developing my Kali Tudo. And as we started having problems doing the gatherings in Hermosa Beach, there were some years there where we were holding the gatherings at the Broad Gym. So just my interest just wasn't in the sport jiu-jitsu past a certain point. And, so that's, but certainly the jiu-jitsu has been a big influence on me.
Absolutely.
And, so where Eric was saying it's a stick fight,
years. I mean, 1990.
Say again?
What did you say, Dean?
No. I mean, 1990, bring it into the fold. I said,
yeah, definitely.
I mean, you're pretty fightful on your.
Yeah, that was about 3 years.
Do that. 1990, I've never seen.
Yeah, that was about 3 years before the UFC. Chris Howder was the one who introduced me to the Machados. And so there was Eric Paulson was training both with the Machados and with Hickson, and he was doing a seminar at the Inosanto Academy. And my training partner was Chris Howder. I knew about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu from '86 when I was training with Paul Bunak, and he started with them, but he didn't open the door for me to train with them. And so, I certainly knew about it and was eager to pursue it. And so when Chris introduced me to the Machados, that's when I began. And that's also when Eric and I were invited by SEAL Team 6 to go out to Virginia Beach and work with them. And Eric said, we need one more guy, something, not just stick fighting. And I say, long story short, we brought Higgin along with us. So this is now February of '91 during the run up to the Gulf War. And so we brought Higgin along, who at the time was actually 10 pounds lighter than me. He was, somewhere in the 180s, and I was somewhere in the 190s. And no one had ever heard of Gracie Jiu Jitsu. And so, you get in front of the guys who were there, and he says, okay, what is your favorite position? Let us start there. And so he went through everybody there, like headlocks and, schoolboy straddle, what Grown Asana then used to call a schoolboy straddle, which is usually known as the mount these days. Whatever position they wanted to start in, that's where they could start with Higgin, and he demonstrated what he was about. And, so that was, a very pivotal moment for them. So, that was, Eric and me. Eric couldn't make it till the second day, so I had to teach the stick portion the first day. And they were sent to pick him up at the airport. And at that point, Eric did have a beard, and he had this very preppy look to him, kind of like a cashmere, sweater or something. And when they went to pick him up at the airport, it's like, that can't be him. The comment was, he looks like a Lutheran minister. But so that was a wonderful experience working with them. Something to remember. So, what was your impression of that? Eric.
Oh, wow.
That was my many memories I have of that. We did a lot of stick fighting. We did one of the men was where we actually trained was like 6 floors below ground, and that I found very. I didn't have a training place like that before, but that was
Well,
very normal for them.
That was their kill house.
Yeah, yeah, and I think going back to what Mark said, it was one of my fondest memories was when Higgins' time came around, because we'd all done some stick fighting and done some knife fighting, but a lot of the guys I think came in with a wrestling grappling background, and Hagen did what Mark said, line him up, and you could see where we were doing this part. There was like a wrestling mat, and then it was right next to a basketball court. The place is full. The guys are playing pickup basketball all over the place, and a big mesh but see-through net to keep the balls from bouncing into us. So when we first got there, one or two guys were kind of lined up side, just checking us out, watch what we were doing. And then as Hagen started going through people, he was kind of working his way up the line. And there's this one guy who was just a monster size, and he
A
um,
chest of an oil drum and arms of an orangutan.
yeah, and just gigantic. And so the guy. He came. I forget. He was. I think he was towards the end of the line. But anyway, so he put it. Hagen let him get whatever position he wanted, and he worked his way out, and he got him. He got him in some shoulder lock or arm lock. I forget exactly what it was, but the guy couldn't believe it, and everybody when it was getting closer to him, it went from like 2 or 3 people deep to almost 6 people deep. No one was playing basketball, and they're all looking over the shoulder of the guy in front of them, trying to get a glimpse of whoever this guy was. But I guess he was a big man on campus. And Hagen, who, like Mark said, he was maybe about 175, 180 pounds, maybe. And just,
180, 180.
yeah,
And
just swam
and
around this guy.
Fred was 230.
Yeah.
Like maybe 6'1", 230, an exceedingly thick individual and of a level of strength and fitness that you would expect from SEAL Team 6.
Yep. Yeah. And Hagen got him a few times. so so that was one of my clearer memories. And we did the guys were great. I mean, there was no like, the challenges or anything like that. They were pretty, they were there to learn. That's their job.
Well,
And
they had sent 2 guys out to spar with us before they brought us out, so we had
oh, that's right.
already
Yes. I remember that.
we had already proven ourselves. So
Yeah.
like, okay, you're proven. You're not going to waste our time with martial arts and crafts. We're here to learn. Very much open mind, learning mind.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that. That was in around San Diego where they did that.
Yeah, we went back to the Rumble at Ramblers Park. Yeah. And so that was actually
Um,
that was the
what
beginning of their connection with
I'm
Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and with the Machados. They continued, they continued that training, and they also started training at the Inosanto Academy. And
Hmm.
yeah,
What was your question, Dean?
wow. Just you guys mentioned the first gathering. Since you two are together, like, what can you guys just get for historical content? Like, what that first gathering was like? I mean, I'm guessing Steve Grody, Bert, and obviously you guys. I mean, whatever you guys want to share.
As far as the Rumble at Rambless, the that was not really the first gathering. That was the first. It was a gathering for a shoot that we were doing for Panther Productions, and but we had a lot of people who have common names nowadays. Bert Richardson's one, Steve's another, and that was probably in terms of the setup and everything was ideal. We had a cameraman who was a roommate of Mark's actually, and a SEAL Team 6 guy as well, and he ran a pretty tight ship as far as getting the audio out, getting the camera stuff going. We borrowed from Joe Jennings, who was the owner of Panther, let us use his at that time very expensive high-end camera. And George, the guy, our camera, knew how to use it. So technically, which is usually where a lot of the glitches happen, that was handled. And then it was just a matter of Mark and me getting enough people to come down to it. And we invited a bunch. I would say about 80% showed up, a lot more than I expected.
well, the foundation there was the After Midnight group from the Inosanto
Right,
Academy. So,
right.
the background context there is I had been, in addition to being a student of Paul Bunak, I was also been his business partner. So I was the one who put together the deal with Panther Productions, which had been very successful. And so when I went to Joe, I said, I got somebody else for you. And he said, stick fighting? Really? I says, Joe, I brought you Paul Bunak. You made a lot of money on that. Trust me on this. And so some negotiations and this and that. And in the meantime, I wasn't with Bunak anymore and was at the Inosanto Academy. And Guru knew Eric through Tuangake. And so he was free to come up and join. And so we were in the Guru Inosanto's senior class. And Paul Inosanto Simo Paula gave us permission to stay after class, and that's where we started doing some really hard sparring, and that's where the fencing masks began, and which was an important step forward. And so when I was organizing the shoot, as Eric said, for the video series, that formed the core, the bulk of the people who were there, and so just I love Phil Jelinas. Somebody was, genuflecting in front of him and, about, original Dog Brother and all of that. And he says, hey, we're just some guys who showed up. And really, that's so much of what it's about. Do you show up or don't you? And there's stories about people who didn't show up or never showed up for the second time. There's a real moment of satori there. And so George had been the one, George was the one who opened the door. I had found George to be the director for Vunak's first JKD video, and he was the one who opened the door for Vunak with the SEALs, and then he opened the door for Eric and me with the SEALs. And so, there was that footage and a couple of more years of, fighting. And it was then when we started fighting in the park in front of my house. And there were also the fights in Santa Fe at Arlen's. And, so I don't know if we really were using the term gathering of the pack at that point. So I had a terrible knee injury from jiu-jitsu. Details don't matter, but pretty terrible. And so while I was recovering from that is when I did the editing. I should jump back and tell the tale of the first series. First time we went into the studio with Panther, Eric, he's like, I'm a college graduate. I know how to talk. And he got, most people doing an instructional video are teachers, but Eric had never really taught the material. He had just fought with it. And so it didn't go very well. And that phenomenal carenza that he did was the last thing we did on our way out the door from that shoot. And there were some very intense matters in Eric's personal life about a month before that. And so, and somehow the guy who set up the shot, the shadow, the lighting was just perfect. And there's a tremendous luminosity to that. It's not only physically impressive, which it is, but there was a luminosity to it. There's a certain magic quality where, for me, as I watch it, I remember what Eric was going through in the months prior to that. And, what was it that Wild Dog said? Art is the collective repository of unspoken human wisdom. And so it's just like there was something very much from the soul that was coming out in that. And, it's, really, quite a remarkable carenza on so many levels. And, so then Eric and I went for about a year. He came over to my house once or twice a week, and I helped him prepare, his presentation. And, it was so hard for him to find his voice in the beginning because he's just so not used to talking to the camera. But once he found his voice, the pieces started coming together. And then when we went in for what became the actual shoot, Joe Jennings is like, he's like, oh my God, look at how little money I'm spending to get all this footage. Because every time it was like first take or second take. And Joe's going, he's a natural. Joe was delighted there. And, so that was, that was that shoot. And, Eric and I were, we had tremendous rapport from working with each other. And there's one moment there where he needed another stick, and I knew he was going to need another stick, and I just tossed it into him, and seamlessly he snatches it out of the air and keeps going, and good memories.
What'd you say, Dean?
That carenza was legendary. People still marvel over that. So whatever you did, I thought for what you played, I think that made up for it.
Yeah, that was, and it's funny. It's part of a routine that I would say it's something I'd rehearsed because it was really impromptu. And like Mark said, it was the last thing we did going out the door. And the guys who set up the lighting and everything just kind of put something there, roll them, and that's how it happened. I mean, it was literally like that. There's no rehearsal, but I'd moved around that stick enough to know what I wanted to do, and it just kind of flowed. Kind of flowed naturally after a while, which is why I love double stick, but I've always felt very, very comfortable with single. So, which is evident there.
And so that was the first series, and so that it was. So I know this now segues into your question about gatherings of the pack team, and so that became our hook for drawing in more people. That are in the early days we had a problem. It was always the same 5 or 6 guys, and
Right.
that gets stale and inbred after a while. And so Joe placed us. Right next to the order form. In those days, it was martial art magazines, and Joe was by far the biggest of the video companies. He would have 4, 6, 8 pages in every of one of the martial art magazines, and so to be placed right next to the order form, and there was this picture there, very unmartial art like. Eric is looming over me like this, and I'm in
I know.
kangaroo entry, knee attack. And I'm wearing kung fu pants in that shot because I had on that heavy metal frame knee brace coming out of my knee surgery. So to cover up the fact that I had that knee brace on, I had on the kung fu pants. It was a very primal photograph, very unlike the usual martial art instructional video photographs. And it was Joe. Salesman, Steve, brutal stick fighting matches. So, he wanted to go with death matches, but we said, no, that's too much.
Yeah, it's a bit much.
And the the way he did it was like, buy five get one free. Then it was buy four get one free. So people started doing the N1 free with us, and word started spreading. And so instead of the usual 4 or 6 guys, I was 8 guys, 10 guys. Geez, we had 12 guys this time, and it just started gradually growing as the word spread. And there were so many things about that first series. As I was editing it and I was doing the voiceover, I started doing the usual. And now here's Eric kicking the ass of this guy, and now here's Eric kicking the ass of that guy. And Eric, he cut me off. No, it's the man in yellow, because he always had the yellow tank top. And I think that was a really pivotal moment. I says, you're absolutely right. And that was part of the note, and that evolved into my articulation of no judges, no referees, no trophies, which is so central to enabling this kind of fighting to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, no judges. We're not keeping score. No trophies. We're not doing it for hierarchical admiration.
Whoops.
There's some internet going on. But here, well, before he comes back, so Eric, what was the event where you guys were at, where the Dog Brothers speak? There were some other FMA groups that were training. There was an interview with Burton. I think the Kambalas guys were there. Like, what event was that?
That was in San Diego, and that was put on, I think, by Ron Harris originally. And it was the attempt. It was an attempt to kind of not unify, but just bring everybody in the FMA community together and get to know each other and so forth and so on. And that's where, I mean, you hear that very famous speech that Mark did about no, I mean, you heard him just say it, but this is where the community at large saw that basically credo: no judges, no referees, no trophies, and so forth. And that was probably, I think, the first place that it was actually announced at a formal, forum. And that was me. Mark Arlen was there, and I forget who else was there.
Dogzilla.
Oh yeah, Godzilla was there too, right? Yeah.
And Wild Dog, Dave
Yeah.
Crosby. Yeah, he
And
was
it was
the bug that the Juggernaut smashed.
yeah, and it was quite the event because
it was on the.
Go ahead.
It was. I'm sorry. It was on the drive down there that I came up with the higher consciousness through harder contact.
Yep.
Anyway, keep
And
going.
I would say it was quite the event because originally, there was a little bit of a, I don't know, either a misunderstanding or some turf war or something going on, because some people, they didn't want to there was like a $20 cover fee basically to get into this place. And Ron came to me, and the guy, he said, "Yeah, we got a couple of I forget which group it was, but there were like 2 or 3 groups who they came from Stockton." And well, we don't think we should pay $20 because we're the greatest, blah blah blah. And I said, well, wait a minute, everybody's paid $20. Is it $20 the problem? Because it is here. I got you $20 right here. I got your whole group in. Then the guy goes, oh, no, 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 we don't have things. Okay, so it's not about the money. What is it about? And then finally, he said, well, $20 was like a bag of rice. I'm like, whatever. Here's your $20. You can go in or out if you decide. And Ron came up to me afterwards. He goes, that was great. That just took, that just took the whole, back wind out of their sails when I just said, here's your money. Just come in, please. We want you in. And the whole point was to meet people, and we weren't there to kill. We were there to show, okay, this is, because this is how I was taught with
Unity,
Leo.
whatever.
Yeah, I'm all for unity, but at the same time, get real. And the issues that kind of what Dog Brothers foundational platform was is that we are hitting for real, and most of the people there up till that point, there was some sparring, if you will, but most of it was choreographed. There was, and to me it looked like dancing. And I just thought,
Yeah.
this is not this is the art, not the martial.
Yeah. No. In
And
talking
so
to Burton, it was like, he was saying the Kabbalah's guys went there and they cut part of their sticks off. I don't know, obviously I wasn't there, but I did hear about the $20. They cut part of their sticks off. I hear there was also the Vilbril, Argusa. They were doing some stuff. But I guess my question is, why were they cutting parts of their sticks off going against bigger Americans and now they're taking inches off their stick? Was that true?
Honestly, I didn't witness that. I heard that, and I noticed some of the sticks seemed a little on the short side, but I really didn't care. I mean, everyone had their own version of our stick is 26 inch, 36, 30 inch. I didn't care. Just does it work or not? I mean, if it works, awesome. If
Well,
it doesn't
I
work, you
think
might want to work on that.
I think a couple of stories are getting conflated there, as is the way of martial arts. The business
How
about
unusual.
yeah, yeah, really. The business about Kabbalah's Sarada people cutting their sticks shorter. I just remember that as somebody, some of them coming to Dog Brother gatherings say, "Well, this is the size we've been using. Let's put it to the test." And that seems to me to be
Yeah.
fair. That's honorable. What I remember from the event in San Diego is I don't think it was the Serrata people. I think it was a group from San Diego. Some of you who understand what that name might be. So that's the way I remembered it. And I also remember Ron being nervous that they were going to kick his ass. And he wanted us to stand next to him, during the conversations. And I'm like, good luck. You're on your own, Ron.
But it
But
worked out.
Eric went out there, and the part about the like, here's the $20, and like, they were embarrassed into it. So what it was is there were three different rings, and each showing a different way of competing. And so we were the third ring, and everybody was like, "Whoa!" You
Yeah,
know,
because it was me and Arlen that did the fighting in that one. and
yeah,
we
that's right.
and
And
we actually went hitting, and actually I think that was the one I got him on an armbar when we finished, as I recall correctly. And
I
they
think
had
I fought him in one of some of the footage. No, no.
I don't remember. I do remember he and I were fighting, and everyone was just like, "Holy shit, these people are actually hitting each other."
Yeah, well, the two of them were like Ali and Frazier. There was just a meshing of styles, and Arlen had the durability to survive the experience. Um, like every 100 fights or so, we would win one. But but yeah, just Ali and Frazier, I think would probably be the closest analogy there. But I think that was very useful in spreading our word in the DVDs. Then videos. Started spreading the word, and so the gatherings became, bigger. And we had 15, we had 20, we had 24, and it's around that era, somewhere in mid '90s, where
Yeah,
Whoops, on again.
he's got some internet stuff. So Eric, was there like did some of the Stockton? I don't know what's going on. Did some of the Stockton guys actually fight you guys? I mean, did they actually just see what you guys were about?
Um, Let me think about that. I can't say yes or no specifically because in the very beginning the answer was no because we were kind of a localized group, but there was no internet or anything like that. There's no message boarding, so I mean, word of mouth was about the only way it would get around. And then by the time the mid '90s started happening, I mean, we would have gatherings between 25, I think the peak might have been 35, 36, of fighters and their posse. So they'd have their girlfriends, their friends, a couple of guys from the gym, maybe their family would come and check it out. I mean, there was a couple of times that we had gatherings that it was a carnival and it was fun, but it was still like one of those old one of those medieval carnivals, but people really hitting each other, and you'd have people down or up or clapping, and they're cheering. We had one time we had this group that was next who
Wow,
lived kind of across the park from where Mark was, and they were a bunch of surfers, and it was kind of before things got really taken to the next level. But we had this surfer group that was watching us. They had just finished surfing these gigantic waves. They're chilling out, having a beer or whatever, and they're watching us fighting, and they were more entertaining than we were, just to watch their reaction to us fighting. And then, they were so cool. And then later on, they said, "Hey, man, we just live over here. Why don't you come over here after you guys are finished for a brew or, whatever." And so we did. We went over there afterwards and they go, "Dude, that is so crazy, man." And, they're showing pictures of them surfing these, 90-foot waves. I mean, that's crazy. But at the same time, it was a lot of fun. And, to Mark, to
That's
Mark's point,
crazy.
we had a, the crowds kept getting bigger. And to answer your question, I didn't keep track of who was coming. I really didn't care. What I did care about was, if someone came from Europe, that's when Benjamin, so we had a gentleman, Lonely Dog, he came from Switzerland. And and then who was the other, Alvis? A couple of people from out of town, and I mean, out of the country even, had gotten a hold of the tapes and had just, binged on them and they wanted to do it. And to me, that was kind of, that was very interesting that people would actually travel that distance to come, and they did. And Benjamin was one of them. And he started the European Dog Brother group as I was kind of as a result of having gone to the gatherings that we did. And but as far as the Stockton groups, I don't remember too many coming from that. Or you have Rami Parisas, that he was a big name back then. I don't remember many people coming from that group, but there were so many people to pick from. I just stopped keeping track. People would come to fight, and they'd bring some people bring sticks, nunchucks, sais, tunfas, uh, just whatever. We just bring what you got. We'll fight it. Mark, again, what was one of the legendary things of the tape? Mark calls me up and says, "Hey, there's this guy Tom Meadows who I knew from Dan and Santos' place." And he goes, "Yeah, he does a whip, and would you be interested in fighting a whip?" And I'm like, "Wow, that sounds kind of cool." And Mark said, "Well, he was watching. I guess he had taped Tom hitting these branches off a tree." And he goes, "Well, you might want to be careful." I said, I looked at it, and I go, "Okay, yeah, I'll do it, sure." That was fun. And a lot of Mark was cautioning me, but the minute he knows. He knows the minute I caution Eric's going to immediately want to do what I tell him, exactly the opposite of what I want him to do. And so, but we got out there, and again, to Mark's credit, it was awesome footage. And to this day, I get people ask me, "Did you really fight a whip?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, it can be fun. It's a good weapon, but you better know what you're doing. And if you're fighting a stick against that, you better know what you're doing." But I don't think anyone's done anything like that since.
Now, actually, a lot of people have been dabbling with the whip since then.
With the whip? Yeah, okay, I
Yeah,
didn't know that.
some of them in Europe. The European gatherings are very big, very strong. The
Yeah.
American gatherings, since you were around, we've had some that were as big as 50, or I think we had one that was 60 fighters, and
Mm.
sort of that got too big because there was too much time between fights. You'd have somebody'd have a fight, and then by the time it was their turn again, they were cooled down. But yeah, it got really big, and I'd say we had audiences of about 250 or 300 people, and back
Yeah.
then there wasn't internet, so it was a question of like cultivating the mailing list only to draw in the right kind of people, and then putting a stamp on the envelope as you sent out the flyer about it. And there was a problem child from we'll leave out the name, from the Inasano Academy, who had been
Mm.
rejected for membership in the Dog Brothers, and so he knew the mayor and he knew somebody on city, and that was the police chief, not the mayor, and he knew somebody on city council, and he started creating problems for us. And so that's when I just said, the police came, and blah 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 blah. You can see there's a what is it? I think it's the promo clip for Los Tricas, where there's two different ones, but one of them you can see the police cars there, and the police lieutenant saying, "Please don't kick this guy's ass." And so that's when we started. I took the road show up to the Raw Gym in El
Rico.
Segundo, Rico Chiapparelli's place. But but then a number of years later, I just kind of quietly returned to that park. That park is really very perfect. It's on a dead end
Yeah.
street. It's bounded on three sides, and it began with that was I was doing my teaching in that park, and the police would have lunch there. So, and that sort of policeman kind of a thought process. They would look at me. A, I was friendly. Hey, how you doing? And B, policeman's mind. I could shoot that if necessary. So with that, like, okay, he's friendly, he's shootable, no problem. So they just got used to
Yeah.
me. And, with everybody in the neighborhood, we'd be sparring or fighting, we'd be walking by, you'd see the freak out expression on the face. Like, don't worry, we made these crazy friends. Over time, the whole neighborhood, just got to understand that twice a year there were this big fight day, and, these people are okay. And, also in the invitations, I put things like, there's no bathroom arrival.
I question. Okay.
What's that? Did you say something, Dean?
I got a question. Toughest fight for each one of you. Toughest fight for each one of you where you're like, wow, that was a fight.
I'd say for me, it would be Arlen.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. The video was bad.
Toughest fight?
Arlen, yeah.
Yeah, for me, definitely Arlen.
Yeah, no, it's I could never.
Both of you, Arlen. Both of you, Arlen.
Wow. For me, toughest fight was Eric. For me, the dance with Arlen was I couldn't match him in power, and I couldn't impose a close on him because he had a very good anti-closing game cultivated from all his fights with Eric. But so I was about dinging him in the hand until he got impatient and grabbed me, and then I had my chance with the stick grappling. So that was my interaction with Arlen, and in the middle years, there was a few years there where Eric was taking a sabbatical, and so for me, gathering day was not only doing fighting, but I was coaching my students, and I was supervising events. There was one time where it almost broke out into a riot because of bad feelings between a certain CLOC group and a certain jiu-jitsu group, and so I was monitoring things that were going on in the crowd to keep things from going sideways and so forth, and so that was a very full day, and I just said to Arlen, "Listen, look, I can't be fighting you, doing my fights and coaching my students and running the crowd." Just keeping an eye on the crowd, because pretty much, self-policing event, but at the same time, certain things needed a nudge in this way or that. So for me, the toughest fight was Eric. Eric and I were doing a podcast several years ago, and I said, I beat Eric only once, and he goes, "When was that?" And I said, "Well, it was in a dream." It's true. You crashed me behind your flying roof. You were in my guard, and I punioed you in the head. That's how I did it in my dream.
I thought I felt something. Yeah.
So, whereas when so with Arlen and me, it kind of got to he wouldn't close on me because he didn't want to deal with the grapple, and it just there was nothing to be learned from the fight. Because for somebody of my durability, Arlen was a dangerous fight. Eric was just physically sturdier genetics than mine. I was 6 foot 190, and Eric's 6'4" and 215, and so it's just a question of true heavyweight versus a light heavyweight, and just Arlen was for me. Eric, I remember Eric describing him as a pachyderm. In the first series, there's in one of his interviews that they said, "Well, what's it like getting hit?" He says, "Well, it's kind of like sunburn." And,
yeah.
Yeah, so so I didn't have the power to put him in fear, and so like, okay, you caved in my ribs, but I got a choke on you. I mean, it just wasn't an intelligent fight for me. So anyway, let's circle this back to the camp. So
yes.
we're doing a trip down memory lane here, but so there's been evolutions over the years. Arlen brought the Krabi Krabong.
I got that.
What's that? What did you say?
No,
So go ahead, Mark. You were saying about evolution.
Okay.
no, I think.
Yeah. So Arlen brought the krabi krabong, and that was his answer to my bringing the Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And the jiu-jitsu changes in stick fighting because you can make somebody make a big jiu-jitsu mistake by hitting them with the stick, and it's much. There's like 3 games simultaneously instead of just the jiu-jitsu game. So he brought the krabi krabong to counter the jujitsu, to make it hard for a jujitsu, somebody with jujitsu skills to come in. And then jujitsu arrived in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and he too began pursuing it. And different games. I think Benjamin brought some real developments.
Mm-hmm.
So just more and more people, more and more games. In the early days, Eric had a formidable knee attack. Arlen had a formidable knee attack, different from, but formidable. I had a knee attack. And so that's when I brought in the Lameko, the Lutang, the swinging front leg to get it out of the way so the drift shot wouldn't catch you. And then, after a while, people stopped doing knee attacks. And then because no one knew the Lutang anymore, then the knee attacks came back. And so
Came back. Yeah.
there's all these surging evolutions and movements. And so, this being a DBMA camp, sort of the subject here, as usual, we're wandering all over the place. But, sort of all these pieces so that I like Asano's image of you don't want to teach people only what you do. You want to have a menu of offerings for them so that they can choose what suits them best. And so, there's different games, there's different personalities, and so forth. And so, something I've been thinking about, this is a riff been going on. This might be the first time it's being recorded, is the difference between Achilles and Odysseus. Achilles is a certain archetype. Mike Tyson was in Achilles. Conor McGregor in Achilles. The image of the guy who can beat anyone. And certainly the movie took liberties with the Iliad, but there was the Troy movie with Brad Pitt. And there's that opening thing where they decide to settle the battle by him fighting this monster guy from the other side, and he just runs at him and he does this leaping thing and he just stabs him and kills him, right on the spot. And then he walks up to the whole other army and he's like, "Is there anyone else? Is there anyone else?" And no one stepped up. This is the Achilles fantasy that most of us have, lurking there somewhere in one shape or another. And I think where Eric is different is, like the Achilles of the Iliad is something of an asshole. And like when he felt his pride taken, he stopped fighting for the Greeks, and he let his fellow Greeks die until Agamemnon, bent the knee to him, and blah blah blah. There's a whole thing there. Whereas Odysseus, he's the one who won the war. So Eric is our Achilles. He, unlike the asshole Achilles, most Achilles on some level are bullies and assholes. And that was part of actually a subtlety to the actual Achilles characters. He knew that if he went to this war, he would die. He would not be invincible forever against everybody. And so one of the themes in the Iliad is how he interacts with them. And, but it was about him, it was about glory. And actually in the Odyssey, there's a passage where Odysseus winds up going down the Hades and he sees Achilles down there and they talk about it. And Achilles says, the glory wasn't worth it. And, whereas Odysseus, he is the one who won the war. The Iliad does not end with the fall of Troy. Everybody thinks it ends with the fall of Troy, but the Iliad was not about the Trojan War. The Iliad was about what the opening stanza of the Iliad said. What does Homer say? He says, "Let me tell you of the anger or the pride of Achilles." So it's all about a transition to an understanding by this particular archetype. It ends when Achilles has King Priam humbling himself at his knee, asking for the body of Hector back. And he breaks down and he goes over to the body of Hector that he had mutilated and dragged around the walls of Troy, and he weeps and he remembers the souls of all the men that he has killed, and he weeps, and he goes back to Priam and he says, I acknowledge, this here, you may take your son's body and we will have funeral games and,
Oh, I was so good. I want to hear the rest of
Yeah, I don't
Odysseus.
know what's going on his end. He's definitely, yeah. Actually, last time I had him on, he did go through that, but it's still interesting to hear again.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You had a question, though. I think you got cut off or something like that.
Okay.
Oh, there he is.
He's back.
Okay, all right. So I heard you guys wanting me to finish the story. So it is about this just killer, supreme killer of Achilles learning to have respect for his enemy. And that is what the story is about. But the fall of Troy does not occur in the Iliad. That's the end of the Iliad, is when he gives that respect. He transitions to that awareness. And even and the fall of Troy is not in the Odyssey. It's in other stories which are in neither of those. And it certainly was known to all Greeks of that era. And so, but the Odysseus is a question for you. Who is the number 2 fighter for the Greeks?
Number
No
2
one
fighter.
knows. No one knows. And I only know this because I cheated and I went and I got, what do you call those little booklets that give you the summary of the classics?
Oh, okay. Not the Monarch Notes. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, not the Monarch Notes. But what was it?
Shit, I used to have them, actually, believe it or not.
Anyway, I
Yeah.
got some of these little cheater books, and basically they're notes written by professors of ancient history, and so they know that all the stuff at a level that most of us don't. And the number 2 fighter was Odysseus, and so there was a dispute over who would get Hector's armor, which had been made by the god Hespasius, and why, if he was invulnerable except for his Achilles tendon, did he need armor? Blah blah blah. At any rate, so there was a competition to settle it, and Odysseus beat Ajax for the number 2 when he received the armor. And Ajax was so humiliated, he felt humiliated, he committed suicide. So Odysseus, he didn't draw attention to the fact that he was a badass fighter, but he was the one who won the war. He won the war with the Trojan horse, and he was always referred to as the wily Odysseus. And the story of the Iliad is on the way home, all the ways in which he overcame terrible challenges through his intelligence and not through his physical skill. And so
The
it
Odyssey,
is the story. Yeah. The Odyssey is the story of the warrior returning home. So like that year on the island of Circe, with he and his men having, sex with Circe and her maidens, and so forth, like, okay, coming back from Vietnam, spending some months in a Thai whorehouse, or, just these are eternal themes. And so it's the story of the warrior returning home and restoring his family. Taking his son Telemachus across the threshold into manhood as they stand there together in battle, and then restoring the marital bed with his wife Penelope, who had waited for him. These are primal, eternal themes. And so, I was never the physically dominating fighter. I think I was pretty good, but to the extent that I had success, it was because I assessed and analyzed and found solutions. And so with DBMA, that's what I look to offer. So, like Eric can show you what he does, and he does it really well. And, like, okay, Eric could have smashed me at the beginning. But, see, he's a different kind of Achilles. Most Achilles would be like Brock Lesnar, when he had, what was that, the Ultimate Fighter TV show, and he says to his team, "You guys are chicken shit. I'll do my best to make something out of you, chicken shit." That's in a certain kind of Achilles mind. Whereas Eric never did that. He could have, he was so far ahead of us in the beginning that he could have smashed us, but he didn't. And there's that evolved into the no judges, no referees, no trophies, and it's as if we are preparing each other to stand together to
Yep.
defend our land, women, and children. Our goal is no one spends the night in the hospital. Our goal is that everyone leaves with the IQ with which he came. However, only you are responsible for you. No suing no one for nothing. No how, no way. But it began with that. And so Eric is, he is the fighting force around whom the Dog Brothers coalesce. I've been the Johnny Appleseed. I'd like to think I've carried the flag pretty well in my own way. But, he is the fighting force around, so for people to experience that and to be in the presence of that, you come to the camp. And it's not like we're some old guys doing a get the band back together tour. I'm still teaching full time, and Eric is getting ready to compete for in his age division, for the world championship in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as a black belt. I mean, he's in really good shape, and I like to think I'm in pretty good shape for my age. So this is not the band getting back together to sort of you get the band together again, years after, because the memories are
Fading.
frazzled.
Yeah.
Both of us have been at this continuously. So he's not been. He's got a sparring group that he's cultivating in Houston. I mean, so this is this is very dynamic and very ongoing, and this is forgive me for doing the sales act here, but one of three facets of Dog Brother martial arts. This is the real contact stick fighting. And something distinctive to the empty hand is I do believe that the weaponry movements form a very good foundation for empty hand striking. I have an empty hand in the game, which I can outperform my age by quite a bit. I mean, if you ain't the lead sled dog, the view is all the same. No one beats everyone all the time. Everyone looks at someone's butt sometimes. But, I think it's got a lot of value. And then I bring that across to the third area, which is the die less often, the interface of gun, knife, and empty hand. So that's where I'm doing my anti-knife work, my knife work. This is where King Abdullah of Jordan brought me out to train, some of his people in the integration of gun and knife in here in North Carolina. I'm in the Fort Bragg area. I'm rubbing elbows on a regular basis with some pretty special military folks. I'm very much a civilian, but there's a lot to be learned from that interface. So the DBMA has those three areas, and so month to month there's the association. You pay your $30 or your $300 a year, and so that allows for direct interface with me, and I think we're approaching 2,000 bid lessons now within the association, and as well as the different ways that people have of training with me. I'm doing seminar at Nathan Carlin Faithful Dog School, and that's the camp coming up the 11th through the 13th. We have several DBMA groups in the central Midwest up north, and so I'm going, I think, for my fourth time to Chicago, hosted by Moldog, beginning of August. I'm going to be at Matt Larson and John Valentine's Combatives the last weekend of October. That'll be on, I don't know anymore whether to say the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf of America.
But Gulf of America, right.
in Mississippi on the Gulf. All my life I've been saying the Gulf of Mexico, and so it just feels strange to say the Gulf of America, but, okay. At any rate, so this is DBMA is very much an ongoing thing. This is not a greatest hits. What do they call it? What kind of a rock and roll tour when a band comes back?
Oh, unplugged.
No. It's basically some sort of a memories tour thing. Yeah, this is part of DBMA is very active and very dynamic, and the piece that Eric has played in our evolution, was and remains substantial. And so for people to get to be around him and to like, oh, that's what I've saw in those videos. I see it. I get it. There's something that can only be learned by being in the presence. And so I'm very glad to have Eric there, and I'll be offering what I think I have to offer.
which is quite a lot, by the way. So don't sell yourself short, because Mark is, I mean, Dog Brothers is because of what Mark did and does. So, I mean, props off, kudos. I don't know what else to say, but that's,
Yeah, I think
yeah,
as a fighter, the thing that I'm proudest of, and certainly, with Eric and Arlen, capturing much of the spotlight, and deservedly so. There were years where neither of them were there, and I was the only one of the big three,
yeah.
and the tribe prospered, and the tribe's reputation grew while I was the lead fighter, and that's something I'm very proud of, and.
Yep. Wow. Oof, Dean, what other questions do you have? Not that we're going to go off topic or anything,
Yeah,
but
no, for sure.
No, not us. It's,
So
yeah.
for folks watching, for folks that are watching, will they get camp information, etc.,
Thank
payment,
you so
sign
much.
up?
Yeah, go to dogbrothers.com. All the information is there. So dogbrothers.com, July 11th through 13. That's Friday through Sunday. Friday starts at 3:30. It's not a full day. And the schedule is there. Information about local hotels is there for those in the LA area. It's Chatsworth. If you go north on the 405 past the 101 and you get up to, what is that, the 210, and hang a left, that's Chatsworth. Nathan Carlin's school, it's a Krav Maga school, or at least that's what the sign says, but Nathan's a girl in DBMA. And I remember sitting on a bench in front of the school underneath the Krav Maga sign, and this homeless guy goes by. He looks up at the sign. He says, "You guys with Donald Trump?"
appropriate.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So going on another tangent here, I put up a meme on my Facebook page. Doctor's there with the patient. He says,
I'm just putting it in now in a comment.
"What's that?"
Okay, should be.
I'm having a lot of problems.
In the comment.
Say again, Dean.
Okay.
Reunion tour.
I just put in the comments.
Reunion tour. That's right. Yeah, this is not a reunion tour. This is, bringing to bear what our growth over the years and what we do. This is not a reunion tour. That was it. Thank you for whoever brought that in. Memory going very Biden-esque here in our dotage.
So what is the when's the date?
I didn't hear, what was the question? Say again,
When's the
Dean?
date again? I'm going to put that in the comment section.
Oh, the date. Mark?
Oh,
when the dates? I'm going to put that in the comment section.
July 11 through 13. So we're coming up on it. And it's at Nathan Carlin's school in Chatsworth. You'll see the Krav Maga sign. All the information is there. Hotels are there if you're not from the area. And just everything you need is at dogbrothers.com. And if you want to join the DBMA Association, dogbrothers.com.
Awesome.
So, all
right, guys. Well, hey, I appreciate you guys coming on. I got to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, so everybody who's out there, sorry, for the technical problems here, and my getting kicked off several times. Not, just I don't know what that is, but my as a boomer, my superpower is to screw up technology.
Very good. Well, it was a lot of fun. Thank you, Dean.
So, and
anytime you guys need post something, anytime.
Great.
All right. So yeah. So thank you for having us, Dean, and so hope to see lots of people at the summer camp. Woof woof.
Like, all right. See you guys.
The
Take it
adventure,
easy.
the adventure continues. Out.
Uh,
All right, guys. Bye.
So, geez, like a lot of technical glitches there. It sort of broke the flow a few times, but oh well.
It's all right. I'm gonna download and all that. It'll work out. I'm gonna figure out what the heck's going on. We've had some really bad rain up here, winds and all that. I don't know if that had something to do with it.
It's what it is. No worries.
But yeah, I'm a little upset too. But I'm gonna figure it out. But no, but thank you for coming on. I hope I hope the camp goes well and everything. So.
Yeah. Thank you for giving us a shot at publicizing it. And it's at the point now where
anytime you guys want to, yeah.
Yeah, no, much appreciated. Yeah, so I'm at the point now where I hope people show up. Just when anyone who ever hosts an event knows that one. So anyway, so much appreciated.
Well, yeah. Anytime. Well, you take care. Thank you.
All right. Well, out.
All right, folks. Thanks for watching. Not sure what went on tonight with, again, definitely some rain and winds up here. I couldn't even load comments. Yeah, so definitely frustrated, needless to say. But I'm glad. I'm hoping you guys heard the majority of what they were talking about. I got to figure out. I'm hoping it was the weather related, but I won't know that until I do some things to this computer. But this has also been going on 6 years. I've been using this thing since I started, so maybe it's on its way out. I don't know. But at any rate, next. Marshall Met. We're taking. Got some stuff going on. Fortunately, I had a really good. Somebody died of my good friend, so. Taking Marshall Mel this week. We will be back next Wednesday. I'll definitely post who's going to be coming on. If you have suggestions for both FMA discussion or Marshall Mel, please, you can message me. You can message Renee. Steve Grody 2 is coming back on. Getting Darcy on there. We got a few other folks. But again, by all means, if you got somebody that you would like to see on here on either show, let us know. All right. I got a few folks probably to carry us out through July, but certainly can take more names, etc., for August and September. Okay, anything. Marcia, Matt, open-ended. Whatever subject matter, whatever it is, we will entertain it. FMA discussion, I'm going to kind of keep that FMA centric, right? C-Lots is okay, but again, Marshall Man. Could be anything. So if there's something you like to see covered, or you yourself would like to speak on, send me a message. Good to see all these. Yeah, let me see if it will post a comment now. I bet you it will. Wait a minute. Of course, it's working now. I gotta figure out what's going on here. Anyway, okay, guys, I will see you next time.